Very good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the materials stage for our session on the outcomes of the government's Timber in Construction roadmap. My name is Andrew Carpenter. I am Chief Executive of the Structural Timber Association. I will be chairing the session. I'm joined by my colleagues on my immediate right, Alex Goodfellow, who is Chief Executive of Donaldson's Offsite, and David Hopkins, who is Chief Executive of the Timber Development UK. Collectively, the three of us are all directors of something called the Confederati of Timber Industries, and it's we that have been working with government over the last couple of years. So I'm just going, before I ask David and Alex to speak, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background, if I may. You'll remember that in November 2021, the UK hosted COP26 up in Glasgow. We were there, and the month following, in December of 2021, the government created a working group with the single objective to safely increase the amount of timber in construction. The government recognised that if the UK is to meet its 2050 net zero targets, we had to look at and interrogate the UK construction industry, which is responsible for 40% of all emissions. Now, inevitably, if you're going to interrogate the construction industry, you have to look at the building materials, and they acknowledged that they needed to increase the amount of timber in construction if we're going to meet net zero. What we're particularly delighted about this afternoon, that even aggregate industries from the concrete sector have recognised the importance of increasing the amount of timber in construction, so much so that they very generously sponsored this presentation. So my grateful thanks to them for acknowledging the importance of timber in construction. So what I'm going to do now, if I may, my colleague David Hopkins is going to take us through the roadmap and the 7 priorities contained therein, and also give you a bit of an update on what we've done already in the last 2 years. And then Alex will follow with a view from the coalface, a view from Donaldson's, who are our largest manufacturing member. So ladies and gentlemen, prepare to be amazed. David, you're on.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you to Aggregate Industries once again. We can't believe our luck that they have sponsored this event. It's very, very good of them. So, as Andrew has said, I'm just going to run you through what the Timber in Construction Roadmap is, how it came about, and some of the themes that it touches on, and what we're doing in response to meet those goals. So, as Andrew had said, the background to all of this really was around the time of COP26 and some of the report making that came out slightly before that. The driver for all of it at the COP26 talks was a realisation that within all of the climate talks, the carbon markets, and all of those other different policy areas, construction was sort of left out. You had a lot of heavy industries which were being increasingly regulated in the utilities sector, but construction wasn't looked at in quite the same way. And then, as government looked at it, with a variety of different reports, particularly those from the Climate Change Committee, they realised that particularly the embodied emissions within construction materials were a huge factor towards the overarching emissions profile of the construction sector as a whole, and that we needed to do something more about it. What was an obvious material to turn to? Timber. And so the Timber in Construction Roadmap was created, or Timber in Construction Working Group was created. We've been through quite a timeline with it, as you can see, through a whole range of initially forming a kind of a sector plan, a whole range of industry subgroups, a range of industry and government co-workshops, both held with our own organisations, a range of other organisations in the sector, architects, engineers, different material sectors as well. Came forward to really at the end of last year was when we finalised the actual contents of the roadmap and the structure of it, and then published it in December 2023. And you can download that if you Google it on the gov.uk website. You can download that report, you can download the whole roadmap. and go through all of the different areas that it details. In particular, we had 7 different working group themes throughout the whole area. And I've got to say that within this, there were several kind of policy objectives trying to be met at once. One, within the whole climate sphere, it's not just the materials that we use, but also bringing on the supply chain. Within the timber industry, the government recognised that actually, if we want to meet our climate targets by 2050, we're going to have to grow a lot more trees, and that our forestry sector is a hugely important part of that. So on the supply side, they saw this as a market mechanism to stimulate the growth of forests and stimulate the planting and management of those forests within the UK. They looked at demand and how we're going to build up demand, building safety, as Andrew has mentioned, the insurance sector, and how do we reassure that sector about building with timber, carbon and all the questions around it, getting clarity about how it's measured, how it's managed, what things are taken into account, what visibility we give to our products and the supply chain emissions and the buildings themselves, the skills that we will need to achieve this. I mean, it's not uncommon in construction to be talking about skills. It's a problem for everybody, but particularly if you want then the construction industry, which is a fairly conservative sector, to move and start building in a different way with different materials. Where are those skills going to come from? Who has the knowledge to start teaching them? How are we going to actually get that done? And then innovation within the sector. So those were the working group themes, looking at a whole range, and the innovation was looking at different designs, different materials, different ways of working. So then those were the themes. I've put them all out there. You can see that on the government's roadmap, really there was a big focus on British timber, particularly. It's been a theme, I would say, any government initiative, particularly since 2016. Can't think why, but they do want to slap a Union Jack on it. In this case, it is about the fact that there was an overarching plan to draw through British forests and British forestry and British timber. And that's come through in all of those things. But what the roadmap does make very clear, the best way to do that and change a culture, particularly within construction, is to start building with timber generally, and then you start to make have a market pathway for any kind of timber, but increasingly for British timber as well. So we're looking at improving data on timber and whole life carbon, promoting the safe and sustainable use of timber, increasing the skills, capacity and competency across that whole supply chain, increasing the sustainable supply, which is a big issue and we can talk about in a minute, addressing fire safety and durability concerns, increasing our collaboration with insurers and lenders and warranty providers, and then promoting the innovation and high-performing systems. So those are the areas, and I just want to run through fairly quickly what those are, what we've been discussing, and then what we've been doing as an industry to make sure that we're meeting them all. So in terms of improving reporting on embodied carbon, with each of these themes, there were a set of tasks that the government have said they will commit themselves to doing, and there's a set of tasks that we've said as an industry we will commit ourselves to doing. So the government is going to look at putting embodied carbon limits for buildings in the future. There have been moves to try and put that in through debates in Parliament and so on already over the past year or two. And I think that it'll come back almost every year until it happens. I think there's quite an increasing groundswell towards it. Looking at effective, proportionate ways of deploying broad carbon assessments, and really looking at the evidence base for the claims made, and then working with industry to expand and improve the evidence around that. We've said we're going to continue our voluntary work to keep measuring and reducing embodied carbon, encourage the inclusion of data on all the projects that use timber, and improve the quality of our EPD database. So what have we done? Well, earlier this year, we released a whole EPD database for timber products. It covers about 95% of the common construction products that you're going to use in any project. It's got full life cycle assessment data on all of them. We've had all of those verified so that it's enough for designers, engineers, whomever, assessors, to be able to make those calculations using this data in a verified sense at the very outset of your designs and a very outset of your project development. So all of that data is available. Monthly now, we publish and run a webinar on a building case study. We do, with each of those case studies, we've captured carbon data, the calculations that the engineers, architects or developers have used to get to that point, and that we run those as a webinar. You can tune in, it's free. We have a lunchtime webinar every month, and looking at those different case studies. It talks about the whole project, and the carbon calculations and the environmental calculations are a key part of those, and we're going to keep doing those every month to keep pushing that out, keep familiarizing people with it, try and move people then to a common form of assessment on carbon, but at least then within each of those case studies, you can download them for free from our website, but you've got all of that data, you've got all of that information, and people can start making use of all of that. So it's just some of those. Last year, we also published a net zero roadmap for the entire industry. Not so much, partly that was looking at the carbon figures for the products, but it was really looking at the industry as a whole, saying how do we measure, report, and reduce the emissions through other activities, particularly transport, but the sort of factory operations, sawmill operations, and so on. We wanted to then look at how do we promote the safe and sustainable use of timber as a construction material. And the government has a series of commitments there within there that you can read throughout that slide, and really to work together with government and industry to keep promoting this. We've said we're going to keep promoting. We've got a whole range of different campaigns, publications, and so on. So you can see on the right-hand side of that slide, all of the different industry groups have various campaigns to make sure specifiers are getting it right with the products that they choose, the designs that they're putting together, whether it's sort of simple products in terms of treatment and fencing and decking and exterior cladding. The brown one there is that's one of the webinars that I talked about, the Design Timber series that we run. We've created a timber and fire safety website between our three organizations, and we have a whole range of other activities between us. We've got a whole range of publications which are free to the market, so engineering data, architectural information, all those sorts of things on a range of different areas. And there is a central campaign from the Structural Timber Association called Time for Timber, which you may have seen, and you can certainly follow that on social media. It's a very active campaign to promote timber. We've also been looking at supporting a whole range of other activities, particularly the development of a range of details now from this particular one was from the Architects War Thistleton, called the New Model Building, which is free. Again, it's free to download, free to access, and it shows you how you can build mass timber buildings within building regulations, meeting as well the regulations, slightly stricter regulations from the GLA here in London, and those things have all been made available and free for you to use. So in terms of skills, capacity and competency, and I said at the start, this isn't unusual to us. This is for everybody. Everyone in construction is facing a massive, massive problem, a huge cliff edge, where I think the average age of most trades now is in the mid-50s, and those people aren't going to stick around forever. How are we going to build buildings in the future? There is a really sort of problematic point that we're reaching, and particularly then with building in timber, we've still got to go through a process of teaching the teachers so that then they can teach others how to do it, the knowledge and the skills. For anything that is considered novel, new, innovative or whatever, that was always a problem to find the teachers to do that. We've got a range of things going on. The government is establishing a kind of a multi-stakeholder committee, if you like, or group in industry forum to look about how we develop those skills, map out where the key areas are, what are the sort of flash points, what are the touch points that we really, really need things now, what do we need in the short, medium and long term. And that's a group that has been sort of named and formed, has not yet met, but we will be meeting in the next month or so. We're also looking at, the government is conducting research at the moment to really kind of look at the workforce needs and demographics and how we're going to change there. And again, really kind of work with industry to work out what are the skills we need and how we're going to do that. We've already done a range of things, but what we've committed ourselves to is looking at routes to competency for each relevant timber occupation, including the training and the qualification requirements. How do you get these people through a pathway and qualified in terms of delivering the buildings? And that's across everything. What we've been trying to do is look at everything from architecture right the way through to builders merchants and putting goods on the market and so on. It's been quite a comprehensive activity. I'm sad to say there are a lot of gaps, but they're gaps that we're trying to fill and do it very as quickly as possible. We're also, as an industry bodies, improving our CPD and upskilling offerings and making those free and freely available for all people within the sort of design and construction areas. So some of the things that we've done already, we produced a timber and construction action plan last year. It was launched actually here last year, so 1 year ago today, and it was a competency framework for the skills for design and construction. So looking at the supply chain, it was really on the design and construction side. And we started putting that into place. So the first output of that competency framework was to develop a new course. It was the TED course, which is Timber Engineering and Design, which is taught at a new college. It was NMIT, the New Model Institute for Technology and Engineering in Hereford. And it was done as a partnership with Edinburgh Napier University. And we've now run, I think there's 50 learners who've gone through that course, ranging from architects through to people working in truss rafter places or joinery companies who can get together to blend their skills to learn the sort of skills that you're going to need for timber construction. And so we've had a lot through there. That course has now been disaggregated to make it even more accessible into a series of shorter courses and make that more accessible to people to do partly online, partly in person at the workshops. So that's come through really well. We're going to be building on that now to look at a whole range of other programs that we can do that meet other elements of that competency framework, particularly as we were discussing only just now, contractor training and how do you get the construction management process right for timber construction, which is a problem. Maybe it's not seen as a barrier because everyone thinks they can do it, but certainly getting it right is a skilled process and we need people who are qualified enough to be able to do that. We've also then, on a similar note, got the STA installer training scheme, so the Structural Timber Association, a barrier for sales. It's a good vested interest scheme, I think a very enlightened vested interest, and it's an invigilated 3-year program. Any of the manufacturing members of the STA are required to be part of this. It's a mandatory program, and it links back to a whole range of vocational qualifications. But it's a comprehensive thing which you can quiz our next speaker on a bit more when we come to questions. We're also then, one of the things, if we're going to increase the amount of timber in construction, is there enough? And it was one of the questions that kept going round and round in circles during the workshops that we ran during the process of putting this roadmap together. So how do we increase the sustainable supply of timber? How do we bring more on? And so we particularly within the UK homegrown timber, but how do we make sure that the stuff we're bringing in is the right sort of timber to come through and is coming from sustainable sources? So we've already got a range of programs going on that side. The government has agreed that it will sort of increase its statutory woodland cover target and particularly increase the percentage of productive forest in there. It's all very well having amenity woodland and forest, but if you're going to increase the amount of timber into construction, you need it to be a productive, managed commercial entity, not just kind of leisure facility woodland. So we're also reviewing the procurement policy and making sure that that is fit for purpose and that there are pathways through for all the different schemes that are coming on, and then to monitor the impact that these policies are having. So, and then from an industry point of view, we've said that we'll identify any of the blockers that are preventing the use of more homegrown timber in particular, and to provide guidance to construction professionals on the use of homegrown and wood-based construction products. So some of the things that we're already doing, just to put people's minds at rest, it's an area that I've worked in for a long time, far more on the forestry end than the construction end. But if you look at Europe, and Europe accounts for about 90% of our timber imports, the European forests are growing. They're growing in response to demand. So the more the demand is there for the timber products, the more forests are coming into management, being planted and growing. We now have seen a huge increase in growth since 1990, if you take that as a baseline, and we're using about 65% of the annual growth, what they call the annual increment each year. Only about 65% of that is used. There is room for growth within our existing land mass, and there's room to sort of increase the volume and the area and the land under management that is managed for forests. It's becoming an increasing priority for policymakers. Ironically, in a way, timber is being seen as a material for climate change, but it's also then the land that it's on is also affected by climate change, and planting more trees, if you think of all the other kind of land-based impacts that we have, of flooding in particular, landslides, all of those sorts of things with extreme weather, people and policymakers are realizing that having a well-managed commercial forest stock covering a wider range of land actually is incredibly useful for minimizing the impacts of flooding, minimizing the impacts of landslides, and helping bind that land together. So there's a whole range of different drivers that come through for people to kind of say, well, actually, this is an incredibly good idea. On the thing on the bottom about the responsible purchasing scheme, the organisation I run, Timber Development UK, we kind of represent the importers and distributors in this country. We've always had a responsible purchasing scheme in since about 2012 and had that as a mandatory condition for membership. It means that all members have to have a third-party assessment to look at all of the due diligence that they're doing on their supply chains and make sure that all of the timber they're bringing into the country is only coming from legal and sustainable sources. And we are doing a lot of work around that. In terms of promoting homegrown timber, we do a lot of that as well. We've just recently, just in terms of sort of technical promotion, published all of the C16 span tables. So if you look at the grades of timber that come out, really a lot of the imported stuff from Scandinavia is C24. The stuff from the UK is C16. We've published a set of span tables, which are, again, they're free to download, and show that for the majority of house types, for the majority of construction projects in this country, C16 homegrown timber is perfectly adequate and acceptable, and you can build with it. I think there's a slight snobbery when you show people two different products. If one has a higher number than the other, that's the one you want because you think it's better. But actually, in terms of getting a product that is fit for purpose, so that you're not over or under specifying, the C16 is perfectly okay, and we have a lot of work that we're doing now to kind of demonstrate, not to promote one over the other, but to demonstrate what is achievable using homegrown UK timber. So then when it comes to, I guess, the more meaty end of the priority themes, addressing fire safety, durability concerns, to safely expand the use of timber. We've got a whole range of commitments. The government is going to work with us, with academia, with the building safety regulator, to look at all of the safety and durability and competency questions and see how policy could change to allow things in, how design could change, how new details and new innovation in design can come through. We have committed that we're going to continue supporting the Fire Safety Hub. So we've got a website that has been developed between our organisations and it's timberfiresafety.org. It's it's got all the words there. So if you Google in there, Timber Fire Safety, you'll find it. We'll keep on doing that. We're putting all of the information up. It was only published out last year. It's got all the principles for design and for designing in timber with fire in mind. And then we're going to keep putting up more information, more case studies, more details, and so on. And then we want to develop and share best practice from all of the demonstrator projects that we've got going around the country. You will also sort of download for free, you can see things like that from the STA, about test data and other things, all from that website or from the Structural Timber Association website. So we've developed that website. Please do look at it. There's a whole range of other fire testing. I think the STA has spent over $250,000 over the past 2 years on fire testing and redoing old fire tests to make sure that things are relevant and up to date. When we come through then on the more commercial questions about increasing the collaboration with insurers and lenders and warranty providers, obviously all of that stuff about fire design, fire testing, fire guidance and fire design is going to be key to them as well. But we also want to look at the process of building and the process of getting insured and what the different steps are to make sure that an insurer is assured that this is a safe building and understands what's going on. So we're working together with government on this to explore the feasibility. Creating an asset register was one of the key asks in the roadmap, and working together to get greater dialogue really between the insurance sector and developers so that we can get a far better understanding of what the risks are, where they lie, and how you overcome them and how you mitigate those risks. Often, coming back a few steps, the risks are not the material, it's the skills and the competency involved in putting the buildings up that really cause an issue rather than the actual material itself. So what have we done? Well, the STA Assure scheme is one of those that's recognised now in a lot of specification documents. This is a whole kind of supply chain program from factory through to construction. It ensures that the manufacturers and the developers are working together. It's got a whole range, it's an audited process so that you have design and engineering standards in there, manufacturing controls, factory production controls all the way through, quality assurance, and that all of the follow-on trades are aware and knowledgeable about all of the care points and the duty to warn about them. We've got a couple of other projects in development. It's a very early stage and they haven't reported back yet, but we should be able to get these going this year. So we've had one meeting for each of these, and they're both projects that really aiming to improve how risk is communicated, measured, managed, and got through. So the first one is about a durability workbook. This is looking at one of the projects that has already come through, the Mass Timber Insurance Playbook, is a guidebook for insurers in particular about the stages that they need to look at and about engaging early with your insurer and the contractors and designers and design team so that everybody fully understands the projects that's being developed. This durability workbook is really kind of the exercise book for that design team on any live project to show that they are following all of those points and all of the key areas that are in that mass timber insurance book. So it would be a live document that you would be filling in as you go. Your insurer, your financer, your whomever could call on you at any time as the design team and say, I want to see that workbook and make sure that you are doing this properly. I want to make sure that you are doing it as you said you would. And then this book will show the evidence of all of the steps that they've taken so that your insurer is kind of right there with you, holding hands, and is assured all the way through that you are doing this properly. The other project is to get an asset register of all of the mass timber projects in the country. And the reason for that is to make sure that we've got a live list and a live register, a record of all of those things. We don't want a situation like with rack concrete, where nobody knows where it is, what it's doing, which building it's in, and so on. Admittedly, if you have got a timber building, you're more likely to know because it's the whole thing is built out of it. But the idea was to make sure we've got that register. We know who the developers, the architect, the contractor, and so on is, that if there are issues that have arisen with those buildings, They can report back under sort of non-disclosure agreement terms, so that there's no things there, and about how they're overcoming them, so that we can start to foster a bit of collaborative dialogue about how things are being done. One of the issues, particularly on say, mass timber buildings, is that insurers hold a bit of data. So if you only have a bit of data that shows the number of those buildings is only this much, then the relative risk profile of each of those buildings is quite high. If you see that actually there's this many buildings out there and no reported issues, then the models that you're working to as an insurer, the kind of algorithms or whatever that they use, will show a far lower risk per building. And so they can start to understand and quantify the risks compared to the number of buildings which exist. I think it's going to be an important project. It's a bit of a difficult one to manage, just in terms of privacy, data ownership, all of that sort of stuff, but I think we will be able to get through it. And those, like I say, they're very in early stage, and we're going to be developing those through the course of this year. And then, really then, when we look at promoting innovation and high-performing timber systems, really, again, we've got to work with government, got to work with the building safety regulator to further investigate, well, what are the outstanding fire safety, the durability, the competence questions that we need for this sector. The government's committed to publishing a new PAS, publicly available standard, specification standard, for modern methods of construction, which will include timber, and promote the results from the Timber and Construction Innovation Fund. So as part of, when we looked at those 7 themes within innovation, they set up an innovation fund. They've got a number of sort of demonstrator projects which are going ahead now, particularly around the Gen Zero schools, and they're going to be publishing those either later this year or into next year. We're going to carry on publishing. Like I said, we publish these case studies every month. We're going to publish knowledge, promoting the best practice throughout the supply chain, and make sure that it's freely available. So we've got a timber knowledge library, which really goes from all of the basics up to very specific and technical areas, and we publish our case studies and webinars every month. So there's about 150, I think, of these knowledge sheets and knowledge library documents will be available by the end of this month. On a similar level, at the Structural Timber Association, about 5 years ago, they published a cost comparison so that the industry was aware, developers are aware of the cost comparisons between building in masonry or building in timber. And that whole project, that whole document is now being updated. It initially looked at just on housing, but they're looking at a whole broader range of building types and sectors in which to put those. And that will be published probably later this year or early next. And it's a live project which is going on right now. So just as I finish, before passing over to Alex, why now? Why are we doing it? Why have we got this thing on the Timber and Construction Roadmap? Why is there all of this interest? If you look about all of the talks and debates at COP26, any international talk, everybody recognises the importance of forestry. Everybody has failed to do anything about forestry. And I speak as someone who has been working in environmental markets for about 25 years and remember trying to get offsetting projects, RED Plus projects, and all manner of different things coming through. They're very slow. What does work to expand forests is when they are a commercial resource. And if you look where you get the regulation right, and you get the sort of sustainable regulation throughout the entire supply chain, and you have a strong timber construction sector, you'll see that the forests are growing. So particularly Europe, particularly North America. If you look at those areas which get regulation wrong and struggle with regulation, you're going to see that the forests are shrinking, and they're seen as something that is in the way. It's in the way of doing something else. Whereas if you have this as a valuable commercial resource, you'll see that all of those trees represent your bank balance, and you want that bank balance to grow. So that is coming through, and it's a big pressure on governments and policymakers everywhere. Architects, designers, and others are calling for this, and there's a lot of pressure on us, on the kind of construction sector as a whole, from the design sector, to do more about this. And there's a lot of pressure now from the construction sector to say, with all the skills pressure, we need more modern methods of construction. We need to look at how we manage our emissions. and we need to do more with timber. So how are we going to do it? We've seen every single policy report that's come out of every single think tank pointing this way and pointing towards a fairly obvious solution of using more timber in construction. And we've seen what is happening with the climate and the reasons why we need to reduce our emissions. Just recently, to try and kind of educate people a bit more, we wanted to make sure that policymakers were aware of the different policies that are going on that can encourage the use of timber in construction. And we started with a book called Timber Typologies to say that not all timber construction is the same. Different methodologies are used to achieve different sorts of building profiles, and different sorts of timber kits are more appropriate for different buildings. We also published this timber policy book, and it's an analysis of all of the different policies that are happening around Europe and other parts of the world at a national or a municipal level to really encourage the use of timber in construction and whether or not they would be appropriate and applicable here. And I'm going to just end just a slightly more depressing note. We're under no illusions. When we're talking about more timber in construction, we also need to recognise that the context that this is happening in is one where construction and house building in particular is very flat, and so that getting that back up is going to be difficult. What we want to do is make sure that when that market comes back, that timber takes a greater and increasing share of that market, and it will require a lot of policy intervention, as the reports that came out last week showed. And during an election year, we would ask you, as industry bodies and as voters when you go to the polls, to try and think who is doing something about this and what will they do and how will they do it. So I'm going to end on that point, if I may, and pass over to my colleague, Alex Goodfellow.
Thank you, David, very much. Just before Alex takes to the stage, I just want to make just very few points. We've been quite lucky with the working group. We've only had 3 chairs in 2 years, which if you compare that with the construction ministers and housing ministers, 3 in 2 years isn't too bad. So we feel quite lucky. We had Zach Goldsmith, Trudy Harrison, now we've got Rebecca Powell. And I know the government's taking a lot of stick at the minute, but in view of this working group, I have to say they're performing very well. They've now asked David and myself and another colleague to be the secretariat to drive this home, and we're using a single-page plan process that I've used before. But the main drivers outside increasing timber, which are obvious, and homegrown timber to meet net zero, there's one other influence which is very important to government, and that is to grow the economy. Because what we want to show is that by using this roadmap, we can actually grow the economy in a sustainable way. So that's very, very important. And just before I bring Alex onto the stage, you might ask what sort of increase are we looking at in terms of timber? Well, the Environment Audit Commission a year or two ago suggested that we need to, as a minimum, get to 40% building in housing in England by 2050. If I tell you at the moment it's 23% across the UK, but only 10% in England, you can see that that's quite a significant amount. There are some that want us to meet the Scottish figure of 80%. So we know as a sector, we've got a long way to go. And that responsibility is not going to lie with the politicians. It's going to lie with our members who are going to invest or have to invest in their businesses to meet this huge increase in demand. So no better now to speak than Alex Goodfellow, who's Chief Executive of Donaldson's Offsite and Chair of the Confederation of Timber Industries. Alex, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for staying, and thank you, David, for a usually comprehensive update on behalf of the good work that we're doing. My name's Alec Goodfellow. I work with these two fellows on the roadmap and many other things to represent our sector. What my role today is to try and give you some insight into how one of the businesses, our business in this sector, how this roadmap becomes relevant to our business. Not everything that a government does is helpful, as we all know, and yesterday was no exception to that. But this particular piece of work, I think, is relevant and valuable and will be for our sector. My comparatively short presentation will cover some of the things that our business is doing in the context of the current market. Mostly the house building market is the area that we operate in, but across broader sectors, how we're responding, what our current activity is, and a bit of an insight into some future direction activity that we will be engaged in. So just briefly to start with a bit about our business, the Donaldson Group is a sixth generation, 163-year-old business, family owned, independent, started in Scotland as a timber importing business and distribution business, has grown into a business of some 400 million turnover this year, with multiple divisions, 1,600 colleagues across 44 locations in the UK. I represent the off-site division, which is the business of manufacturing in the MMC space, in timber frame, roof trusses and the like. And in that off-site business, you will see that we are located across the UK. We have a door manufacturing and stair manufacturing business in Scotland, factories in Scotland making timber frame, and we also have 10 locations throughout England making trusses, joists and that sort of thing, biggest in the sector and covering all parts of the country. So to the market context, I guess, and challenge that we currently face. Andrew mentioned, as did David, that the house building market is perhaps not at its best. I'm not here to talk the sector down, but we've had better times. I hoped we might have heard something yesterday in the budget to help the house building market, but sadly lacking again. But nevertheless, the market will return. These macro dynamics do always bounce back, but things are tough. We have a homelessness situation in the UK. I think everyone understands and I believe accepts that we need to build more housing. Interestingly, we have an industry capable and ready to do that in housing and in manufacturing. The macro conditions around inflation and mortgage rates don't help. And as if that wasn't bad enough, we have a skills shortage. And also we've had some high profile failures in the MMC sector and the modular space, which is unfortunate. And again, what we're here to do is to define some of the good work that our sector and businesses like ours, many of our STA and TD UK members, some of the things we're doing. And our response to that challenge really is to say, as Andrew mentioned, that timber frame construction in Scotland, over 90% of the homes globally would be the same in North America and other countries throughout Europe. England is the exception currently, 10%, but growing rapidly. So the sector is well placed, and we also see the major house builders entering the sector as the future home standard improves the requirements for the quality and energy efficiency of buildings. House builders are responding to that challenge by moving into the timber frame space, a recognised, well-established space. So we can work to help solve that housing crisis and meet the higher demands of appropriate legislation. The capability in the off-site panelised space is very real. There is a manufacturing member in every county in the country, and we see a time for growth coming. Perhaps weather the current storm and get the election behind us, but we certainly see a growth curve coming in the house building sector and the manufacturing of MMC product space going forward. This image is one of our factories, one of our main factories in Witney in West Oxfordshire. We've been here 20 years. What I'm going to try and do is tie in some of the themes of the roadmap into work that we're already doing, have been doing for years, and are now going to commence because we believe in the relevance of the roadmap. This factory here, we'll do about 5,000 homes a year from this factory for many of the major house builders, many of the local house builders around the country, social housing, affordable housing, call it what you like, as well as a private space, as well as other commercial buildings. We only utilise sustainable materials, and we will be delivering maybe 20 homes a day from this facility in any given period. We also have a factory in Scotland is doing kind of similar numbers, and we're looking to grow our nationwide coverage. This is the inside of our factory, just recently refurbished in the last year. The two yellow robots here that's Remus and Romulus. We just brought them over, and we from Sweden. We've invested many millions in a new automated wall line and floor line to make closed wall systems with pre-fitted windows and doors, pre-finished floors in that factory, essentially to ensure high precision, high quality products going into the built environment with high value of sustainability and low carbon, as well as taking a significant step towards helping solve the skills crisis that is currently within the construction sector, within the trades sector population. This here is an image of one of those panels I spoke about, closed, insulated, with the wall and a window in it coming directly from our automated factory. We have 300 installers across the UK working with 500 installers working across the UK and Scotland and in England mostly. We certify, we check, we audit everything that is built. So when the house builder, when we finish our part of the process, we'll have a digital file that is kept on record to ensure that everyone understands the competence applied and the standard provided for the house. Obviously, health and safety is a particularly high priority for all businesses, so we work to all the latest health and safety standards, and building in an off-site manner reduces risk on site. Knowledge is key in any complex construction situation, and training and development of the workforce, both within our business, across the sector and amongst our customers, is key. This image is our training centre in our factory in Witney. We have a CPD accredited programme of 8 modules of training for architects, for engineers, surveyors, on-site skills, all of the other trades that our customers and stakeholders may require. So again, responding to relevant elements of the roadmap, responding to creating an environment for growth, where if you're going to build something, you want surety that it's built with competent individuals who can demonstrate their capability, that they are trained, they are knowledgeable. You can rest assured that your building is of the appropriate standard. Research and development, again, improving data on timber and whole life carbon is one of the main, the first element of the roadmap main theme. Our business has a history, as indeed has our sector, of research and development. We built the first code level 5, for those of you old enough to remember what that was, but a major step towards sustainability and high performance and energy standards in 2007 at the BRE. We've been involved in conjunction with many of the major house builders, some research programs on improving MMC and the value on site. And most recently at Salford University, you may have seen the energy lab there, where 2 homes have been built inside that black box at the university. We worked with Bellway Homes there alongside Barrett Homes to build 2 houses indoor that are being currently monitored for as-built performance, again to provide the surety of the performance of the building does in real time what it actually said it was going to do during the build process. And finally, recently this year, we've, as David referred to, we've produced our EPD for timber frame floors and walls. So if you're a specifier or a builder and you want that comfort that the timber sector needs to give you, then we're able to do that from a history of innovation and R&D. In any business, partnering is key, whether that is with your stakeholders, whether they be customers, supply chain. We've refitted our factory with the same technology partner that we built it with 20 years ago, a company called Randek, who are highly skilled in automation, based in Sweden. So we have a 40-year relationship with our main timber suppliers. So it's a business built on loyalty in all directions. We work very closely with many of the local authorities, government bodies, and obviously our customers. So again, partnering is alive and well and still very fashionable. And how do we see the market going forward? Andrew mentioned the disparity in proportion of housing that's built in timber in England compared to other parts of the UK and indeed the world. How are we going to do that? Why would people do that? Well, they'll only do that if they have confidence. They will only do that if we have accreditation by third parties. Everything that we build, and indeed many of the STA member manufacturers, will be the same. Our products all have BBA approval. They all meet the standards of the NHB Accepts programme. We have BOPAS accreditation, third-party accreditation, to ensure that you can buy timber products with confidence. Everything that we make has a fire test done for it. We won't make anything if we can't prove that it meets the fire standards, and we work closely with all number of organisations to ensure that is a high-quality, reliable, sustainable, warrantable product that people are specifying. And whilst we may be the biggest in the sector, I could say safely that all businesses within the Structural Timber Association are doing the same thing. So we have an industry-wide capability that you can specify with confidence. And finally, the 7 themes of the roadmap that David explained in enormous detail are alive and well and relevant in our business. We'll be working to ensure we take the benefits of that roadmap forward, that we meet the challenge that the government has set of that roadmap, and we create an environment where one day all homes will be built this way, even in England. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex. Well, we come to that moment now, ladies and gentlemen, where it's your turn to participate, because this is the Q&A part of this afternoon. So I have a young lady at the back who used to be a dancer, by the way. And if you don't ask questions, the threat is that she and I will do a double act. So I suggest you come forward with your questions. Who would like to be the first? Now, don't be shy. We have one on my left, yes. If you could give your name, your organisation, and to whom the question is asked, please.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm from Construction News. I'd love to see a double act, by the way, so I hope this doesn't dampen the chances of that.
Be careful what you wish for.
It's a question to everyone, but I guess particularly to Alex. Why do you think that house building in Scotland has succeeded much more in using timber than in England?
I think you might just speak into it, Alex, and a man at the back will put you on.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah, right. A a lot of it is to do with culture and habit, and in England we cut a lot of trees down once upon a time to fight a couple of wars with the French, and we've created a culture of building in clay and masonry, and that's good and that's fine. In Scotland, not so much. Timber has been a raw material from a homegrown forestry situation, and I guess construction is an industry that has some challenges with change, perhaps. You know, we know what we like and we like what we know. Sometimes is said about us, but I think we are seeing that change now, and we're seeing in England that people, major house builders, for example, Barratt Homes, Persimmon Homes, Taylor Wimpey, Cala, Miller Homes, Vistry Homes, all now have timber frame manufacturing businesses within their own companies. That tells me that change is happening. They are definitely still buying from ourselves and our members, but they are now preparing to see that the skills crisis, the challenge with carbon, with new regulations, with the responsibility within their ESG strategies that they all have, we're certainly seeing more and more of that happening. So I'm less bothered about why it was the way it was, although we think we understand that, but we can definitely demonstrate change and movement, and I think we'll see significant growth in timber frame, which is why we want to be absolutely sure that we're doing it well, that the standards are very high, that the knowledge sharing is very available, to ensure that we can have a sustainable long-term industry.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Who would like to be next to ask a question? Yes, down in the front here. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Joel Cady from the Welsh School of Architecture. I guess the question for all three of you, really, but I thought the way the roadmap was discussed was really interesting, very thorough, and interesting to see how industry is responding to it. I was wondering whether the scope of it includes timber-based insulation products in any way, or whether it's mainly a focus on timber frame and mass timber.
No, insulation's in there, and there's quite a lot of work at the moment to look at the possibility of building a wood fibre insulation plant in the UK. The process of doing it is very much like making MDF or a product like that. You've just got more air in it, really, in a way, and there's a lot of scope in there to look at that. It was mentioned all the way through, actually, a lot of different workshops. We just don't manufacture it here at the moment. I think a number of companies are looking at doing so, and yeah, it's certainly on the cards.
If I could just add to that, initially we spoke about all products in wood, and then we analysed where was the immediate opportunity for maximum gain, and it was acknowledged that it was timber frame in housing, because that was already in situ and we just had to build on it. There is a direction of travel. For example, wood windows and doors is another example. So yes, it's about using more wood, more timber in construction, but because of the, if you like, the limited time resource that we had, we looked for the low-hanging fruit, to use that awful phrase. Yeah, thank you.
I could just add that in our factory, for example, that's just been refitted, we blow glass fibre into the cavity within the wall frame. We looked at potentially having a supplier of timber-based blown fibre, I'll call it. The technology and the commerciality wasn't there when we specified maybe 12 months ago, but I think, as David says, it's not something that we rule out, and I think it would be great to have a product that had that type of insulation in it, as long as we can do it in a commercially viable way. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Who would like to be next? Anyone on my right-hand side like to ask? Yes, thank you. We're 2-0 up here to the left, you see, so you're pulling a goal back. Well done.
Thank you. I was going to ask, you talked about C16 and C24 timber. I was going to ask Alex, do you use C16 timber in your frames?
Yes, we do. We use both. It's mostly significantly Swedish. We don't use an awful lot of homegrown, but we do use some. And again, the technology in homegrown C16 and C24 is improving as well. Yeah.
We've got to remember the UK is a net importer, and it will be for a long time. The volumes that are consumed here, at the moment, if you look at the total market, it's about 60-40 in favour of imports. But when you get it to actual construction, it's about 80-20. And there's a fairly low supply of UK timber going into construction. It's not because it's not good enough. There's just not enough of it. And so there is the main thing I think we've got to do there is to increase the supply and increase the land under management for UK forestry and for UK commercial forestry there, so that we can start to bring that out.
Thank you. I think we have another question, the equalising question from my right-hand side. Off you go.
I actually have two questions. One is maybe for you, is how does this future homes regulations kind of fit into this picture, right? And the second question is maybe to you, is cost and hurdle right now traditional build versus wooden frame or wooden build?
Did I hear the first one's about future homes and the second one's about cost? I couldn't hear totally. So we've been working with the Future Homes Hub for the last year or so in terms of content. And to be brutally honest with you, we were really disappointed when the standard was released, because it really didn't move the goalposts far enough. So the honest answer is we were disappointed. We do, however, have confidence that in time to come, we will get those further regulations in place. I mean, one of the things that David talked about in the roadmap, we are looking with government at, for example, Part Z in the building regulations to have embodied carbon as a requirement in the regulations. So the honest answer at the moment with the standard, we're not happy, having worked on it for 12 months, but it's work in progress. On the cost front, David did mention briefly a cost comparison document, actually released by RLB QS 5 years ago, not by us. So it's an independent report, and they looked only at social housing. And in that report, they found that timber frame was actually 1.1% less expensive than masonry. What government have done is taken a real interest in that report, and they've asked RLB to reconsider it 5 years on, to update what they did last time, but also to look more widely at private housing, at health, at education, at hotels, care homes, student accommodation, so that we've got a far bigger picture on cost. Because the myth is that timber frame is more expensive. Actually, it's not. And when you take in the other benefits, the speed of construction, the lightweight construction, foundations and so on, prelims, actually timber frame is considerably better value. And we're hoping that RLB, we've got our fingers crossed that RLB will produce that in a cost comparison this year. We're quietly confident, I think, is the political statement. Alex?
I guess I should have addressed that in the earlier question about why the percentage in England is lower. And I'll add a bit of colour by using a national stereotype. I'm Scottish, and we're not famed for wasting money. You may have heard that, come across that even. So if 95% of the homes built or thereby in Scotland are in timber frame, there'll be a good commercial reason for that. If 5 or 6 of the major house builders who they know how to buy efficiently, they're quite good at procurement. If they've now opened their own or bought their own timber frame business, I guess commercially they believe it stacks up, and I guess we all know that time is money. The major house builders will tell you that a house maybe takes on average 25 to 26 weeks to build in masonry. That would not be uncommon, I think. We would be expecting to build the timber frame house in 13, 15 weeks. That's got a commercial value, so long as there's a market for building quickly, which at the moment is less the case. So hopefully that adds a bit of colour.
Thank you for your question. Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, sir. Gentleman in the middle there, that's it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kevin from Automated Architecture. It's a question to the three of you, really. Alex, you have a very impressive list of accreditations. But do you see a scope in the roadmap to actually allow smaller contractors to also obtain these accreditations? Because it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of money to be BOPAS certified or to have your ISO standards.
I guess as a commercial business, I could give you one answer to that. As the chairperson of the CTI, I would say that we need to work harder within our trade associations to help smaller members be able to afford that accreditation. And through things like the STA's Assure scheme, we've made it possible for smaller manufacturers and businesses to be able to accredit their workforce. Other things we've done is we've made it possible for smaller manufacturers to be able to access fire tests. So they may not have paid the £15,000 or £20,000 for that fire test, but as long as they sign up to the requirements of the STA, and they can build to that fire test as long as it is exactly to the specification of that fire test. So therefore, they've saved a lot of money in doing that. So therefore, we have to ensure that we have the health of the entire industry and sector, rather than the big boys who can afford it sweeping up, which, nobody would want that, would they?
I think it's true to say from an STA point of view, we're keen to work with the whole supply chain, whether that be big or small. We're really keen. There are a handful of companies like Donaldson's, very large at the top of the tree, but we have quite a tail of SMEs, and we're really, really keen that that tail of SMEs adheres to the same STA Assure process as the big players. So we push all our education, all our knowledge, all our training right the way down through the membership, and they are required to attain the same STA Assure accreditation as is Donaldson's. We don't distinguish between the big and the small, but inevitably someone like Donaldson's has got more resource to come and do things like this, for example. Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions? Oh, we have one more. The late equalizer from the left-hand side.
Hi, Adrian Lee from B&R Phoenix. I guess it's a question to all of you, but okay. To Alex, in terms of, does it seem to be an opportune part of the market? There's millions of homes already existing that potentially could be extended, so more bed space, more living space. How do you see the potential for that, for sort of timber solutions to extending existing buildings and homes?
Retrofit, accommodation, changing from office to housing.
Yeah, so you might have like a two-bed home, and instead of needing to sell up and buy something bigger, as that household expands, they have enough space to build 2 bedrooms at the back. What's the size of the opportunity to do that out of timber solutions?
I'll start on that one if I can. The opportunity is huge. If you think of all the houses, so I live in northeast London, and Terrace Street, every house, including ours, what do you do when your kids get older? You put a dormer on top and you extend out the back. That's exactly what you do. And that's been done primarily on top in timber. And why do you do it like that? It's lighter, it's easier, and you can kind of crane it in and work on it much more simply. And so for a lot of those houses, doing that, it's a lighter weight material, and you can extend up and back through it. I think the opportunities there are really where you can look to substitute products like steel for I-beams, LVL, and other kind of engineered timber products on a domestic level. What we also see, particularly in London, there's a huge project now really looking at building on top of existing buildings for commercial buildings, where you could do that in timber frame, you can do that in CLT and so on, adding a few more floors onto commercial buildings for office space or for whatever. And that's huge. There's a research project going on. Years ago, I was involved in a project doing a similar thing where we mapped out all of the roof space that was available for commercial solar projects. Now the similar projects are going on, mapping out kind of roof space and available space to build upwards. So there's projects in Southwark, there's projects in, half a dozen that I can think of around London and probably elsewhere in other cities. So I think it's going to be a very big market. I think there's going to be a big market for cutting up existing office space and putting sort of panelised systems in as well. Whether or not you can do that on sort of all domestic projects, I don't know. I think there'll be practicalities around there, but certainly the opportunity is there. There's no reason why not. On a technical level, there might be if you've got a crane hole, sort of panelised wall systems up and over a building to kind of make an extension into somebody's back garden or whatever. But on a technical level, I don't see any reason, any barrier.
Just to build on what Dave said, I visited Melbourne recently. My daughter lives in Australia, and I visited a site in the middle of Melbourne, 6 stories, and they were building another 10 stories on top in CLT. And the reason, exactly what David said, it was because it's a relatively lightweight material. But the other thing I'd like to mention is about retrofit. Obviously, we understand that 80% of the buildings that we're going to be here in 2050 are currently already built, and there is an opportunity for sort of I think Energy Sprong are doing something in terms of like a SIPS overcoat. So I think with innovation, there are opportunities for using timber in that retrofit area as well to upgrade the properties. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I think that's probably the end of the questions. Unfortunately, there's no time for a duet, so sorry to disappoint you. But there will be tickets for my next production available on the web. Seriously, could we please thank Alex Goodfellow and David Hopkins in the normal way? May I thank you for staying with us throughout. I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And if you go away with one message from Future Build, it is time for timber. Thank you.